Test. Ooh. Oh, that's quite strong. Test. Yeah, I think that's fine. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at the Tula Culture Center. And thank you for being here tonight for yet another session of Rhythms of Matter. This series of lectures on architecture was conceived as a collaboration between the Faculty of Architecture and Urbanism at the Polytechnic University of Tirana, the Territorial Development Agency, and the National Territorial Planning Agency. And the idea was to capture some of the inspiration and vitality of the architectural spirit that currently defines Albania right now. Of course, we're also very grateful to Kleda and Alban for giving a home to this series here at Tula Culture Center, which has been a house of art, music, and recently also of architecture. So thanks a lot for being such gracious hosts, as always. Now, one of the special things about this series has been the chance to hear architects speak not only about their projects, but about the ideas and concerns behind their work, the way they think, the questions they return to, and the different ways architecture can shape the world around us. Tonight, we're very happy to welcome Kersten Geers and David Van Severen, co-founders of Office. Founded in Brussels in 2002, Office has developed one of the most distinctive voices in contemporary European architecture. What makes the work so compelling is its conceptual clarity, the sense that each project is shaped by a strong architectural idea, but never reduced to image alone. There's often a clear order in the work, a precision in the form and the structure, but also a real openness. The projects feel rigorous without feeling closed. They create flexible frameworks rather than fixed images or cages. And within those frameworks, life is allowed to unfold in all of its complexity. That feels especially relevant in Albania today, where architecture is often working under pressure. Between growth and continuity, between development and public life, and between speed and long-term value. So we're very glad to have Kersten and David here with us tonight and to hear more about their work, their process, and some of the questions and ideas that continue to shape their work at Office. So please join me in giving them a very warm welcome. Thank you for being with us here tonight. And I always forget to introduce myself and my co-moderator. I'm Martin Alita, I'm an urbanist and architect. And I'll be joined today in moderating by Ray Kochi, who's an advisor in the municipality of Tirana for inclusive planning. So a big round of applause for her as well. Kersten and David, the floor is yours.
Okay.
Whoa, it's loud.
Hello. We're testing still. Do you hear us?
Hello.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Hello.
Can you hear the Okay. Oh, how? Hi, everyone. Hello, David. So, well, we were asked, of course, by Martin and also by Adelina to do this in a way, what we called in the end, a difficult double talk. And we thought the most, the most honest way to approach this, because very often lectures are some sort of sales pitch of all the amazing architecture the given architect is able to make. We thought it's maybe more interesting to use it in as a conversation between David and myself, and to simply show some sort of kind of brief history of the office. We have many slides, so it's about 170 or something. So we are supposed to talk in 35 minutes. So we have a problem. So in a sense, overcoming that problem together is the main task of tonight.
Yes, indeed. Because also we have been working together, and sometimes scary to realize, for 24 years. So we started in 2002, and then developed step-by-step work, and I think we should move to the work. This is, by the way, our office in Brussels. You see people, I think,
And you see actually...
Yeah, they are on the picture, probably.
Valentina, Elisa, and Jan, who's actually our partner here.
So our team is also present, because of course we're working also in Albania, and then you see also in the models that stand everywhere, there's furniture, there's art, there's projects ongoing, there's even some nature in the picture. It's a very nice place, so whenever you're in Brussels, please come visit us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because, of course, when David and me started working, we probably did not plan this. I think we, and I start hereby, we started working together on this project, which in fact, the reason for this project you cannot see on the picture because we were asked to design a table. We did design a table, but somehow we convinced the clients that the table needed a space, because we thought the space made no sense, right? And somehow, I guess, when we both started working on this space, we were not necessarily planning for a 25-year office career or something. No, we thought, let's see what it brings. We thought the space was nice. It took quite a while to do this. We got to know a little bit earlier Bas Prinsen, the photographer, and became a very close friend. And we convinced him. He was taking pictures of the Maasvlakte, which is this kind of area close to Rotterdam, where he was depicting people doing strange activities. And he somehow showed that there was a very particular space full of potential. And so we said, hey, Bas, what about photographing that very tiny space? So he was very intrigued because, of course, as you can see, it's a kind of space which tries to implode itself or explode itself. And so this is the first picture I think Bas ever took for us. And every other picture you will see in this presentation is also by Bas. So, and actually, for the small anecdote, I guess that's what we are doing here tonight. When that was, the little space was finished, A plus U, the Japanese magazine, contacted us and said, hey, we heard you made a space, can we publish it? And we didn't even have a name, and we had our own name. And I guess, I think actually in the garden of Paul Robrecht, we kind of decided that our office might be called Office Kersten Geers, David Van Severen, in a super pretentious attempt to emulate Belgian fashion design. Because we thought, you know, we have Dries van Noten, Martin Margiela, stuff like that. So yeah, that was the beginning. Now I have a few more slides to show and I'll go fast. Then we, actually a client of that notary space, which you just saw here, had the plan to escape from his wife in Los Angeles, and he asked us to make a space which was part of his cunning escape plan. Now, I mean, of course, the story is much more complex than that, but so in McKinney Boulevard, I think, we ended up transforming, or that's what we thought, transforming a place with a horizon of light. So where the first project was obviously a perimeter, which you cannot see, the second one was just a horizon. And we actually slept there, and actually this was our first office.
So our office was started like physically in Los Angeles. It has a big influence still today.
And David would normally point out at the palm trees here on the right.
Very important.
Very important, the palm trees. And well, so this was maybe more than our first office. It was our first, I mean, our first shared place in a sense, our first house. Since then we got into other families, but I mean, either way. So the project never materialized, but somehow close to this one did, which is, we call it Summer House. And as you can understand, it was not yet really a building. You know, this was in a way an addition and a reflection. You see it here in two images, which is not much more than a rectangle. And it was, for us, it was a contemplation on that tree, which was already there. You can hardly see it, but there's a trace of tree here somewhere. And turning a kind of garden into a courthouse, a patio house, and to a space which was, in a way, more precise than the house next to it. So, these were these first experiments. And then, together with Bas Prinsen and Milica Topalovic, we made this collage. And that was, I'm sorry, it's a lot of firsts in the beginning. First collage, so by just putting this white paper on a picture of Rotterdam. So this project was called Tower and Square. So this is the project. You see a tower making a square and two towers making a square. That's 2004, I think. And in many ways, as you could see, the perimeter, the horizon, buildings making a space, what's the negotiation between form and space. Again, here with Dan Budik. So, you know, we always worked with other people because we were not really an office. We were thinking maybe to keep on working together. The last one of this series, and here there was a lot of super studio, but then in the Berlin version, was this one, which is called Museum in Motion, which we did together with Dries van der Velde and Richard Venlet, an artist with who we ended up working a lot. And this, I mean, we often consider this our first spatial collage, even though it was a model picture. You see the top is a kind of cutting board. You see that here? Where we used to cut papers as a cutting board. That's the table, and then a bit of paper. And it somehow anticipated this idea of a building of many rooms. So, I mean, it comes back, and we cannot talk about everything at first, but I mean, this architecture of rooms, and rooms, content and form, so to speak, being independent, somehow for us, got born there.
Yeah, and also this, let's say, combination of, I think what Kersten was showing, built work and unbuilt work. For us, it was all the same. So when a project was made, it was also made as a project and not, I mean, and then there was the pictures by Bas Prinsen, which in the built version already made a picture of it, but then we made our own collages. And in this project as well, you can see the plan which shifted from a kind of museum plan to, in this case, a border crossing that we made between the United States and Mexico. Like, how can you bridge these fence? We made an oasis. So also thinking collage, and at the same time is the promised land, not in between the two countries. And in that sense, making these collages gave us some kind of abstraction towards, let's say, what is architecture, but also you could somehow dream a new reality. And that went on into real projects that we were going to build. This is a project for a Belgian photographer for a house of 16 rooms, and that was one of these room projects. So we saw some perimeters with rooms and a big perimeter around a lot of palm trees again. And then this was the 16-room project, and so we like to conceptualize these numbers also. You will see we number our projects since the beginning, and there's certain of a kind of counting in it. And it never got built, but this was supposed to be built. But still the collage survives. A model that we made of that project with a weird cross. The site was not rectangular. We solved everything in the cross, as you can see here. And somehow that was also a way of working that started to make somehow sense for ourselves at that time.
Yeah, well, indeed. So this Office 17, and we thought we would build all these things, and this photographer client was convinced he would build that thing too, but then he somehow got into some sort of weird paranoia, and he never built it. So, but talking about paranoia, in a sense, we moved to a gigantic scale. I mean, around the same time, We were working together with Per Vittorio Aureli and Martino Tattara. I mean, we were friends at the Verlage. I mean, in the sense that I was working in Rotterdam and I was often in the studio of Per Vittorio, PV. Also, by the way, on the Albania studios here, all the capital city studios, Brussels, Albania, then it moved to Brasilia, stuff like that. And I mean, of course, there was our connection, as you see it developing here, David and myself, and Martino was, of course, Per Vittorio's connection, and ended somehow as a researcher or research student in the Berlage himself. And there was some sort of opportunity, it was an open competition for a new city in South Korea, which was, I mean, the then president wanted to kind of argue for a new administrative capital as a new city. Outside Seoul, somehow to break, I mean, that was the argument really, the power of Seoul as the main center of the country. Now, later he lost the election, so the project never actually got built, but we won that competition. I mean, there were a couple of winners, but our team, together we won that competition with this scheme. And it was an important, I think, step for all of us in that, you know, these elements you just saw, two towers making a square, the horizon, the room, the sequence of the room, all of a sudden jumped scale. And in a sense, the walls were not anymore walls, but were buildings. I mean, there was an argument here that was that what you see here, these white cutouts just introduced earlier in Rotterdam, were here enormous buildings, say, well, not enormous, 10 floors high, a size which was typical for all these slabs in South Korea, for all these housing complexes. And ultimately, the argument was, if you would rearrange them and make space with them, reminiscent to the Tower and Square project, in a sense, in Rotterdam, you would make a city of spaces on the one hand, and a city where the grid is not street, but the street is the built form. So kind of form and content. So we made these very quick collages. I remember we did the whole competition with the four of us, probably in 3 weeks. I mean, the plan was drawn, these collages were made with the cutouts. I mean, we probably stole fragments of, I think, below is Gursky, then above is some sort of Mies. I think the stars is even from SML somewhere, I think. So everything was quick. This was a picture we took a few years earlier in South Korea, and then we cut out. So this Baldassari-esque approach to how you make an image, I think we made a step there in some way. But also a city of rooms, or the room as an urban idea somehow got born. So in parallel, or very soon after that, we did this competition entry together with Richard Venlet again for this, this extension of the Library of Asplund in Stockholm. And you could argue it kind of silly way, the kind of circle in the square, we turned into a square in a circle. There was a question about this hill on the top, and we argued that you could make some sort of strange ramp arriving at that hill. But most importantly, I guess it was to this urban void, right? So how can you make with a building actually a space? So that ball you see here is a kind of found object. It was actually on the street as a sculpture, and it was rolled into that space mentally to show that it made the core of the library, which was supposed to be a kind of, to a certain extent, digital library, so not a books library that was next to it, as public as possible. So with this idea of space as a kind of carrier of a project, so kind of a kind of complex dialogue between form and space, probably got one of its most extreme kind of statements here, which is in 2007, when together with Lieven de Kouter, which was a quite crazy trip, we went to Ceuta, which is the north of Africa, actually just, Morocco, kind of a bit of Spain on the other side of the Mediterranean. We crossed the border together with Lieven, and with Bas Prinsen actually. And we made this project, which we called a kind of a cité de refuge, kind of a city as a figure, a kind of an empty place, part in the water, part in a way square, kind of materializing this impossible to solve problem of people trying to cross, of course, the Mediterranean for a better life. I mean, almost a bit like what David was explaining, this kind of oasis as a border crossing, the kind of question of what's the goal? Is there where you are waiting for your kind of ultimate kind of desire? Is maybe the place when you leave it, or try to leave it, you realize you left that fragment of Eden. So that figure, very heavily inspired by Robert Smithson. I think we should say that. I mean, the non-places of Smithson played a big role. You have these fantastic sculptures who actually, and we made a model very similar to that, a kind of double metal frame, in Smithson's case full of rocks, and in our case, well, full of metal. I mean, so which kind of negotiates, as with Smithson, I mean, that's a collection of all this kind of debris of space. And we saw it pretty much the same. I would say the debris of Europe, the leftover, that what you can't solve, but you can show, is here depicted in the plan.
Yeah, and the plan, I mean, Kersten was mentioning this model for the Ceuta project. The plan, the model, the collage, I think there really are tools in how to think and make architecture. It's really, there won't be a lot of models on the display here, but it's something that in our office practice is extremely important. And then again, the plan, and of course there's sections, but we decided to not show them tonight, try to make it a bit, well, short, to show our short history of the office, or brief history. So, but this plan, again, rooms. And it was a house, and it got built. That's the house in Belgium. A very good friend of us asked us whether we would want to build a house for him, and it was a serious question, because he really wanted to go and with his family live in a way in the countryside, you could say, but Belgium really doesn't have countryside. It's very sprawled out, and this is a very amazing, again, picture by Bas Prinsen that shows that the house that is built looks at the fields. There's even a forest in the back, but there's neighbors, two neighbors. It's a kind of villa one next to the other, and in a way, what we decided to do was the fence, typically, that everybody puts between the houses. We made the house out of it. The house is the fence, and then you get this weird space, again, between the real fence and the actual house. And somehow it makes the first silhouette. It makes a house that actually embraces the fence as a garden, embraces it as a space, and makes house out of it. And you can see it overgrown here with a glimpse of a top that also is inhabited. And inside, there's a plan, and of course we can show many more plans, but this was an exercise, one of these first exercises on how to materialize such a plan. And downstairs it's all built within the fence in stone. And then this one is the top floor with this identical plan, but made in wood, as a kind of translation of one world. And then the attic, you could almost say, on top of that with a central staircase. And the idea, every room is the same, almost like the city that Kersten was showing, but then on the size of the house. And what does that mean for living? The bathroom is as big as the living room, and as the stair room, and so on. And so this gave this whole thinking around what is actually a house, and how could you live in it, and can you have furniture spread out in these universes. And then again, a very big perimeter project. We were asked at the same time, we were working together with Joachim de Klerk, at the time of the Berlage, actually, when we were also involved in the studios for, Albania, for a sense. It was this project in Belgium for a big exhibition complex. Actually, we joined in the competition here for Expo Albania. Unfortunately lost, but it was also our first step into Albania. This was Expo Kortrijk, and actually we designed, in a way, a big fence, you could almost say, around the complex. This is a 40,000 square meter complex, and the only thing we almost designed was its frame. It didn't have any, you could say,
well, to negotiate with
facade.
the city. I mean, the problem with these buildings is often they are like in the periphery, but they become city. I mean, so we thought it needs a place of negotiation. There's an inside and an outside, I mean, which is fundamental.
Yeah. So indeed, and that gives us this again, plan and scale, as was said in the introduction, is a very important element, because as you can see, it's made by some kind of measure, as almost like a ruling device. Every unit in this case is 5 meter 80, which is the unit of the complex, and so on. So these architectural measurements are very important in the work.
Well, yeah, this perimeter, I mean, it's, by the way, it's only number 47, and we go until 380 or something, so that you know, huh? So you could always walk out if it's boring. We try to go fast. So this perimeter, I mean, it's, of course, it's also for us, it's fascinating, because you put them in an order, brief history, and we throw out most of the things, but there's a few things left. And so you saw the perimeter of David, very precise, you know, in a sense, the measuring device, as he just said. Here you could say it's the inverse, so the 2 buildings reminiscent to the tower and square, 2 buildings with a square in the middle, small buildings, 2 floor high, in an existing site where we actually decided to build up the site as, again, a wall, and so to make that play between this irregularity of the place and somehow make a protecting wall around these 2 very vulnerable buildings, so vulnerable that the client was always complaining that they were too light. But okay, I mean, here they were, you see that? Very beautiful. I mean, it's one of, I think, our favorite projects of that era, but also one of the projects where we had the biggest trouble with our client, who decided to do a computer shop on the moment where people did not need computer shops anymore. So, well, but still the project's there. And in some way it introduces a set of figures where the difference between one figure and the other kind of makes some space in between, and you saw it here very beautifully, and you see it here again, of course, 2 bus pictures. This was the 2008 biennial Belgian pavilion, and all of a sudden you have the building of the Belgian state, let's say, the normal pavilion, the Belgian pavilion in the Giardini. We built a gigantic wall around it, and we filled all the space in between, but also all the floor inside with confetti. Actually, we both were throwing confetti for 2 days, which was very funny to do. And then we put these chairs, and in some way you carved out a space, I mean, similar to, of course, things we showed before, but for us, I mean, we called the project After the Party. It's 2008. I mean, you probably all remember that's exactly when the party was over, everything crashed. It's as if we knew it in advance, because you start working on a project like that a year earlier. For us, it was about kind of going back to basics. You know, is architecture not just architecture? You know, a very simple idea, like it's wall, it's building. People walked into the Giardini and thought, where's the Belgian pavilion? Because they knew that building, but then the building was not there. They saw that building, they entered it, and they saw this. So this is as far as we could push it, so to speak. In a sense, when Ordos and quite some friends, even nowadays working here, people which became important for us, we met up there. I mean, Ai Weiwei curated this set of buildings, which of course in the end never happened. We were afraid of the possible circus of architecture, you know, like you make many buildings by many fancy people or wannabe fancy people. So how do you avoid that? So very much like in the biennial, I feel there's a big similarity in attitude. We decided to make this house. We all had to make a house of, I forgot how much, 1,000 square meters or something, enormous. And we made this big wall, like a garden wall. And then inside you realized it was 2/3 on the ground. So in order, we argued, of course, to have the cold in summer and the heat of the earth in winter, so it was kind of ecologically sound, smart, but of course also to kind of protect yourself against the sound, the loudness, the noise of our neighbors. So that's the plan. I mean, in the family of plans, when we experimented with other dimensions, in Buggenhout, which David showed 4x4, here I think it was 4x8, trying to understand how you can design a building without giving any compromise to function.
And this was called 25 rooms, so again counting. The counting was important. 24, let's say, building up, but the 25th room sticking out, being the servant's house in a weird way. But that's an anecdote. But again, here, a project that we built in Belgium crazy story. Somebody, it never really happens, rings the bell of the office and comes to us, asks for a project. I mean, really walking in well, it's, I think, the first and the last who did that, but normally you get a mail or they call us, and we're still doing projects with him and her. But anyway, they have this house somewhere in Belgium, and it's and they want to make a holiday house, a weekend house out of it. It's totally not an area where you go for weekends. So we were very surprised by the question, and in a weird kind of village, and so we thought, like, let's make behind the house, which was a long garden, typical Belgian situation, the actual house, like a mix. Is it a garden? Is it a house? Is it a weekend house? Is it many things together? And so this became the project, literally behind the existing small house. Typically, as you can see in Belgium, everybody has these strips. And then there we thought, like, it can be actually fitting exactly 4 rooms, one after the other, and they make a kind of sequence of living. One is slightly covered. Actually, this glass roof can roll from the first roof, like a convertible car, over to the next roof to become like a covered pool, as you can see it there. Then there's a fixed roof, and then there's another garden. And so they make this sequence of different rooms, but are they in or are they out? It's very confusing, you could say. And ultimately, they also, again, make, you could say, your way of seeing the world, but from your tool of perspective that we somehow wanted to make. This is, of course, a reference to A Bigger Splash by David Hockney, which one of our amazing references, you could say. The idea of hedonism and the weekend house altogether. And at the same time, and that's 2 years later, then the Biennale that was shown by Kersten, we were asked by Kazuyo Sejima, who was the curator for the new Biennale in Venice.
And Anton, who's here, I mean, we know from there.
Was also part of that Biennale, indeed. Anyway, we were asked to do something far behind the Arsenale. They found another garden, and there was a left abandoned building.
They didn't know what to do.
Yeah, so they gave it to us. And then we somehow made this intervention with a weird roof, introducing rooms that somehow showed also work of us together in relation with Bas Prinsen, but ultimately also, and Bas took this picture again of this roof we built in front, making his pictures into collages. And that was also the discussion or the relation of the work we wanted to present in 2010. We got the Silver Lion for that project, so still very happy for that. And you can see how his picture frames and literally measures, you could say, with the slender columns, this amazing wild garden that was done by Piet Oudhof, a bit in the back there. At the same time, and then we're talking buildings again, we made this school. I'm getting somehow sour throat. I don't know why.
Already.
A school in Leuven. Yeah, it's in a way also these scales again. So it is a competition we won, and it's a school that overlooks the city, and then you make a kind of a facade with classrooms, but you cut out actually a new room, and that's an open room. We worked there with Richard Venlet. And it's a building that oversees, let's say, agricultural fields. That is actually the school's purpose. They learn agriculture. But then inside there's also a sports hall. So you see this kind of double height suddenly turning into the outside room, become a very big inside room for
like
sports.
Ordos in a way, no? Or it's closer to Ordos, I realize. I never thought that. Okay.
So it's like super deep dug in, but at the same time it's part of the outside world again. And here, in the same sequence, a project in Chile, actually, we were invited by Peter von Erlichhausen to do these multicultural centers in Chile around an area which was struck by an earthquake, actually. And this was our proposal with big sliding gates that surrounded the building that was actually a cut-off dome space, as you can see here. It unfortunately didn't get built. And even one more project, very important as well. I mean, I didn't know I had so they actually, with Jan, we worked very hard on this, and this is a discovery of our first, let's say, corrugated, micro-perforated applications, and it's a big drying hall. It's a big industrial hall where you could say, what is a hall of industry? It's basically an enormous skin around some structure that has to perform. And you see it here from the outside. It has a shifted geometry, but from the inside it's totally open. Actually, the wind can blow through it. It's almost like a ghost because of its skin that we chose, especially for this wind that can go through it. The trees can dry that are standing in there. You can see it here. It's quite high. Big doors, and so on. So here you go, Kersten.
Yeah, no, I know. I will promise I'll try to speed up a little bit because we have so much more to show. So more squares. I mean, there we did a house with many squares for an artist. Actually, it's an atelier and a house above. We liked the house very much. It was a long process. They had a very big ambition. I mean, read a lot of Kafka and somehow felt that it had to be translated in a house. Hopefully we managed. So here it is. And we tried, I think, here the experiment, after all these walls, all this protection, I think it comes back later in solo and things like that, we experimented with this. The most intimate spaces are the furthest to the perimeter. All of a sudden, gigantic windows showing the toilet and the bathroom and the shower. So you see that here in the plan. Yeah, that was, oh, sorry, I did something really strange now. How can I go back? Can somebody help? Okay, thank you. Anyways, you see it here, while we go back to full screen, you see here this plan with these things. So you know, of course, I hope we convey this desire to endlessly keep on testing and changing and understanding our own track, right? I mean, like, what is the room? What's the dimension of the room? What do you do when you all of a sudden make something extremely exposed? How do you occupy space? So here, another artist, Thomas Roy, close friend of ours who wanted to make an atelier in a very long building. He bought, in a way, two buildings in the front with deep, one with a long building and one with a deep garden. So we, in a way, opened one of these walls and turned them into some sort of, you see it here better, in the main mediator between garden and building. So this kind of, in this undulating line, oh, other side, making this space with boxes as part of it. So a radical transformation, you can say. And I mean, maybe we also mention it because, of course, I mean, today you have these hot topics, right? You have radical transformation, greening, whatever. But these are always there, of course. Architecture is always about that. I mean, and I think for us it has always been a desire to make it to almost so natural you forget it's about that. So anyhow, this is a key project for us. We met Noor Al-Sayab in the 2010 biennial. I mean, Bahrain won the Golden Lion, and we won, as David said, the Silver Lion. So we met each other in this kind of context of the ceremony, and she invited us to think Bahrain. Now the truth is, we ended up thinking for many years, right? I mean, so there was this problem of people making music and not having a space and using, in a way, a house, a dar, to make that music, and how you would keep that, how you would keep it alive, how would you give it urban sense without destroying that building. You don't see the existing building in these images now because we keep it relatively short, but we decided to make this building next to it 3 floors with similar rooms, and these columns and these plates, and then this curtain which can open when something happens, when an event happens. I think next image shows that here. And of course you don't know that when you design this, but we were just talking about it this morning, looking through all this endless amount of slides, that the plates, the columns, some of them structural, some of them infrastructural, the box inside, it became a trope. Like the walls became a trope, like the ceilings became a trope. It became an element which we could never walk away from anymore. So you see that here, columns, objects, rooms, and in a weird way, and I gave the word to David again, you see it here, but then...
Yeah, almost like prototypes, you could say, for this project that became actually also in Bahrain a very, very it's a landscape project. We did a pathway of 3.5 kilometers through the labyrinthic old Arabic city, together with Basmets actually. And we designed, I think it's like maybe 18 little squares that connected along a monument and some UNESCO World Heritage sites. Actually, an invisible path. They just invented it. And how to find your way in such a labyrinth. And in a way, this was these little places. We found like unbuilt sites. You can find them.
Were gone essentially.
Yeah, they were like
and taken over by
derelict
cars.
site. Nothing was there. Cars were there. But we thought, let's use them as opportunities to make urban space and to somehow introduce a bit of city life. As you can see, people sitting. There was always trees shielding from the sun, which is super
which
hot.
we added the trees.
Yeah. So the trees were there and added by us. The lamps, the benches, the floor. It's all almost like a room inside, but put outside, and replacing the mass that was sometimes there again by a new void, which was also some kind of mass, you could say. And then the wayfinding happened actually through following these lamps, almost like the columns you saw in the project. Kersten showed this Center for Traditional Music suddenly became a lamppost, and like the breadcrumbs from the story of Hansel and Gretel finding their way home became actually these lampposts, finding your way through the labyrinth. And then suddenly you had to cross an enormous road. And there we made a 120-meter long bridge, crossing the road towards the beach and looking finally outside this labyrinth to, this was all connected to the pearl, actually, business that is an old tradition in Bahrain before they discovered oil. And somehow it thinks back about what's the heritage of Bahrain, what is really let's say the soul of the space, and it has something to do with many projects we do that somehow try with very simple means to rediscover some very basic and elemental things. And finally, this project, together with the DARS, but also other projects that were introduced by Noura Al-Sayeh, won the Aga Khan Prize, the very big prize in the Middle East for architecture. And then, another project, many. Solo House, at the same time, I think we met Christian in Venice.
In 2010.
Yeah, and again, that famous Biennale with the Silver Lion. He approached us for this very crazy project, which was building houses in the middle of the wilderness in Spain, in this nature reserve, almost like there's no water, there's no energy arriving, no gas, no electricity. You have to survive. And so this is a picture of the bedroom, actually. And you see this bed. Sorry, I have to go back. And here. And then you also see this on top, and then this circular plan and curtains and wilderness. And it's actually this house that's in the middle of nowhere only by living on the edge of a certain plateau and amazing views all over the place. But and this is actually on the edge. You can see how it drops the terrain, makes a house that is a circular plan, 45-meter diameter, but on a width of 4.5 meters. So that's how the plan makes living possible. And you see here the solar cells catching sun for the energy. There's water tanks that are painted by an artist, Pieter Vermeers. We will work with him, and he's actually visiting the next week.
You lose your voice.
I'm really getting sour throat.
Salt. He's our salt again. He was our salt last year. He's again our salt.
Yeah.
We keep on bringing him.
So maybe you have to do it alone from now on.
Oh no. Okay,
This
the
is the
plan.
plan.
Yeah, we all, as you probably noticed, the plan is always the switch, so we know when the plan comes. We're liberated. So okay.
Wow.
So here.
I have to
Okay.
kind of
Well, drink some water.
I try.
Okay, but well, so you saw this Bahrain stuff, which was really it's a switch. It's also funny because we talk like this. I think it's ever the first time ever we talk about these things, and it's long. We apologize, but we have our fun, I guess. But somehow through Bahrain and the solo, which David was just showing, I think entered some sort of robustness in our work. I mean, somehow these early paper projects were translated in very light buildings, and you saw them. I mean, of course, which need a lot of maintenance. And we learned through this very simple way of building in Bahrain. I mean, the squares David showed and the dar. We learned how to build in a way in a context where in a way little is available. We thought that was really important. You know, like, can you make a building with a few elements? Can you make a building which survives? I mean, there was always this interest in frame content, but survival became a far more important story. So this robustness, which is certainly also there in Solo, is just a plate and then these objects on top. I mean, you know, and then it's Peter Vermeer's painting. And here I'm sure I can say somehow, can use all these 3 projects which come to talk a little bit about that. So this is a very strange project we did together with Bas Prinsen in Shenzhen Biennial, which is no more than a wall, a circular wall. You saw the plan here, which in fact depicts pictures of a wall again by Bas pictures. So these are pictures by Bas of the wall around the Dendera temple in Egypt. Now I must say, when he did this and he showed this to us, I had never seen Dendera temple, so I was thinking it was actually the temple or something. But no, the temple is extremely beautiful and pretty, but he decided somehow to turn his back to that temple and photograph these walls. So, and this, we decided to depict a picture of this wall, a gigantic picture, on this very thin wall in brick, you see it here, as a pavilion. So, you know, we've been working on these, we don't show them all, but always with Bas, as exercises in architecture. In like the biennial pavilion, 2010, I think this is 13 or something. There's the relationship, there's a research going on. But I would use it here in terms of robustness. So, you know, what is material? And that material is very much here apparent. You know, it's a project. Actually, we were joking this morning. We accepted this project initially because we had no more work, and actually the project was about doing interiors for the state. Never any of these interiors materialized, but somehow this building did, which was lucky. It took quite some years. I mean, I think it started 2013, but probably was only finished 16, 17, something like that. And what was it? It was a building, or what is it? It's a building which already existed before, same program, same administration offices, and is today still the same, but it had a gigantic problem. You cannot see it here. It has gigantic isolation problems, just a cold structure. And we simply proposed to build a complete new building around it. So you see it here. You see here all the new building, the very robust, very, you know, brutal in a way structure, these plates with the holes, which was all calculated to negotiate with sun and solar gains and whatever, but of course doesn't look like that, which is important, we think, you know, that doesn't desperately communicate its good intentions. So here it is, and here it is again. You see here the structure inside, you know, we just kept, we painted it, and we built this enormous structure around, which is only ducts. So in this logic, and you can talk about this project in a very different way, of course, but in this logic, this project is this crematorium, which is roughly developed around the same time together with Richard Van at the competition. We were very intrigued with this very difficult program, a crematorium, in Belgium at least, from say 10% when we were kids to like 70% today of people who decease, who die, are cremated. So they became amongst the most important public buildings, these buildings, and they're horrible. I mean, they're boxes, they're efficient, there's no soul to them. And we were thinking together with Richard when we did the competition, like, how on earth can we do this? How can we twist it? How can we keep it efficient, in a sense, but give it a particular soul? So we designed this building as a naturemort, still life, this big plate tilted, columns around it. And in a sense, you could say, that's the key, you know, like how that plate negotiates with its content. And then inside, you have this set of walls with endlessly changing openings and also colors up to gradually the middle. And then again, that corrugated aluminium David introduced earlier. And here's the middle. So that this space, which of course is a very heavy space full of ventilation, stuff like that, is also, and all this fixed furniture we designed together, is also in a way a very particular slightly rough, but also intimate space for a moment, as you can see here, under that very basic roof. So robust again. And you see here the plan. I will not go into the plan, but I will use the plan to give it back to David, another square here.
If my voice allows it.
Yeah.
Let's
I can whisper.
Let's try. So a competition in Latvia, I think, for the Arvo Center. Actually, we got second prize, but the idea again of rooms, but this time, could you go from a very small room to a very big one? And you can see, again, with the same sloping roof, but very different, because there's you have a lot of forest, but also a lot of lack of daylight sometimes in the north. So why not making it out of glass, this roof, and have this kind of sequence of rooms, with sometimes they are patios, sometimes they're a glass roof. Anyway, it becomes like a universe of different spaces. Again, almost like is a center for music, classical music in this case, not like a house where you have different rooms, different trees, they come through the roof, and they become part of life and of the music even. And talking about jump. Music is a very big jump. Now, what we just finished is this building in Switzerland, in Lausanne. This is a building for what we say often radio and television, but because we grew up in the 80s, but this is a media building today. It's all media, of course. Everything we see on screens today, we hear from speakers. And it's the national broadcasting station, the headquarters from this French-speaking part of Switzerland.
Next to the learning center.
Next to, indeed, the GMAS Learning Center, so a very good neighbor. And it also has a view to the lake, which you don't see here, and the mountains, Mont Blanc and so on. So it's an amazing spot.
And it's here because, of course, we number the projects when we start them, and it took 11 years to build it, so it's here. I mean, it's just finished. That's the strange thing.
So we won it, indeed, in 2014, and this is a set of very, let's say, complex spaces that negotiate, let's say, what is being a media building today. It needs to deal with very ephemeral things. What is media and making media? Cameras, microphones, studios, but also creation, ateliers, offices basically. It's a big house, and again here, a very different way of approaching it, almost like an enormous space, you could say airport-like, but it's also very intimate at the same time. And with different corners, skylights all over the place, because it's ultimately a very, very big field of spaces, interrupted by 4 buildings. This is 150 meter long, this plan, and it has 4 actual buildings holding it up, as you saw in the first picture. And it works in this way where space can be very fluid. That's, let's say, the field, this weird ear shape. It can also be very precise and rigid, if you want, and it's the big buildings, almost a certain urbanism within an own building, and that's the studios, the fixed, the hardware, you could say, of media today.
Well, I wanted to go back 1 second here. So, I mean, this is, as David was explaining, in a way it's a building as a city, right? I mean, so it's so big and it's so complex that you had to find an extremely simple formal approach, as David was explaining, these squares and then this ear shape almost, so as to house any possible iteration of media, which obviously has changed radically in 12 years' time, and it works. But this building as a city, I mean, that's the only bridge I can find for the next project, is a little bit here as well. It's a very different scale, much smaller, and I mean, you know, you cannot understand even why they one after the other, but that's just sequence, right? Is here, in a way, it's a co-housing, in a way, it's a co-op, you want, which is a set of 4, 5, 6 houses together in this long stretch of space, not unlike this weekend house David showed in the very beginning with the sliding roof. And I remember an earlier version was even looking not so different from that. And gradually became this almost checkerboard-like plan of gardens and houses. It took forever to build it, and it's beautiful in a sense because it brings us back to an aesthetic which maybe earlier project had, but then simpler, that robust story of earlier. So this simple wall, and then these plastered volumes and these painted volumes inside. So you see here this wall, see one of the volumes sticking out, and then this sequence were always the only thing which we could design in a sense inside, because they're rental or for sale houses, is this kind of slightly zigzagging space, which is both the negotiator between the gardens and also on the backside, the entrance, the kitchen, and so forth. So you see that here, and you see that here again. So it's actually, it's very recently finished. I mean, this is early in this sequence because we started a long, long time ago, but it's only finished, I think, a year ago or something. No, something like that. So, which has nothing to do with this project, which is a circle. I mean, yeah, we do essentially only circles, squares, rectangles, and so forth. This is a bridge, which was important, I think, for us, because I think it reintroduced an idea of technology, structure, I mean, lightness, heaviness, this, I think many tropes which for a while we put a bit on the side. You can see inside it's glass, outside is actually aluminium. It's a bridge between the Belgian parliament and actually meeting rooms of that parliament. So it almost works like this bridge we all know in Venice, which is also supposed to connect two buildings in the back of the Signoria, I think it's called, the parliament there, and where you are not supposed to really see what happens. So we thought we do the same trick, but you see a glimpse when you're inside. It's a circle, it's in a slight slope, as you can see, and the slope allowed us, I mean, the slope was always there, but the circle allowed us to have enough length as to not to have to invent all kind of strange elevators to bridge that slope. Now, here you see that, we go quicker, you see how actually the whole thing hangs on the top, and you see, since it's a plan, of course, it's probably a project you should better show in a section, but okay, fair enough. That plan allows me to give back the microphone to David with another circle. David,
yeah,
what about it?
Wow. Well, I don't know, but I think the brief history isn't that brief, finally. But, well, this is actually a library in a Belgian city we built. We won a competition quite some while ago, but it got 2 years ago finished, I think, or it's a library, and we thought, like, can you make, like, the bridge you just showed, but many other projects as well, they have this perimeter, and you saw also actually the project for the Asplund Library is one of these big inspirations in Stockholm, where the books are actually put all on the circular perimeter, and we thought that could be an amazing library. Imagine we make such a building, and so we made it, like you see here, and you can see literally the books following here the glass window, but they all are actually inside as well, following the full perimeter, and they're the actual library, and they become also the structure of the building. It's a wooden structure that holds up this pitched roof, and at the same time it has this reading garden, and this is one picture of it, a corner where you see through the garden, again, the books, the library, the sloping, curved wall.
It's similar to the bridge, I realize.
So there's all these links, and that's why we show you this longer history of today.
The longer short history.
and then somehow to show also how each project somehow influences the other one, and that's I guess how our office works, and that's also what we were somehow supposed to show you today, is how this image even relates to the previous one. And this is a collage of a very big learning center, production center in Seoul, a competition that we actually
desperately lost.
Yeah, we lost it. I think Anton was also in the competition, by the way.
That's very true.
Yeah, and so everybody had these ideas. I don't know who won finally, but anyway, this was our proposal: a big garden in the middle of a very glass-like building that has a plan that tries to solve with the corners, let's say, the garden.
Yeah, I think mitre was the word, right? I mean, remember I learned the word mitre in that plan. Somebody explained me that this is called
45
mitre. Mitre. So it's also language in the end. So mitre, and now a sequence of rooms. I always say when we do this presentation, I don't want to talk about this project, but I try. I mean, it's a very beautiful project. Of course, we love our project, but I mean, it's a gallery for, I mean, a good friend of ours, Tim Van Laren, who asked us to do this gallery very, very fast. I mean, Jan did the impossible job. I mean, he does always the impossible job, but here it was beyond. I mean, I think it's very funny because it's 247. I think then it was built a year later or something. It was surreal. Anyhow, it's I can show it here. It's a sequence of spaces, of course. I mean, but in some way, you know, it always moves on. I mean, I think here we were intrigued. I remember Tim Van Laren was obsessed with America, with LA, and this idea. I mean, oh, we understand each other, right? I mean, we also. And we somehow convinced him that it was possible to make this set of buildings almost like garages next to one another with this central opening, and that kind of urbanity was a little bit kind of putting under pressure the context, which, I mean, we appreciate this whole urban plan by Seki Vigano, it's interesting, but it was also true that in all its kind of development, it lacked some soul. So we thought all these buildings around were typically built with this kind of prefabricated concrete elements. Let's make it out of real, rough concrete. They were all, in a way, non-solid, despite the fact they would like to be solid. Let's make it brutal, you know, direct, openings in boxes. And so this was a very important thing. And so especially that it became, and I remember Jonathan Mies, the artist, called it the Moby Dick of art or something, right? I mean, so he made some drawings of it. And well, that's not, this even Mies, I think, here. Yeah. Anyway, so the Mies, I think, was the first show. And then inside, it's the opposite, right? Maybe like Moby Dick, who knows, if you would go inside his body, you would realize it's a very soft body in some way. So here, the body is also very soft. It's all wood. I mean, in order to make it possible in a relatively reasonable way to make this concrete building, I mean, the insulation is inside, and the structure of the roof is wood. So to avoid the cold bridges, you have all this wooden kind of structure here, and then these sheds which are following the north. So you have, in a strange way, a bizarre complexity in an otherwise seemingly simple building. So you see it here, I think Tim calls this the chapel or something, this higher space. So you have a set of spaces which become almost architectures on themselves. So yeah, I have no clue how I could connect it to this project, but we did it at the same time. I mean, but as you can imagine, it's not so strange in our office. It's another of these projects which we really love. I think that counts for both of us. It's a Trebbio olive mill, which is nothing more, and in that sense there is a link, we always find them, with the Tim Gallery, this kind of robust piece of concrete. Here it was supposed to be rammed earth mixed with concrete. I mean, there was a very moon kind of obsession by the client. But either way, so this enormous plate is in a way the architecture. It's just this big circular plate. It's following somehow the kind of, the slight tilting of the landscape. You know, it follows the landscape, under which is a simple box. I mean, it's for an olive farm, so where they get from olive oil from the olive trees. I mean, we got the job, but now they still haven't built it. So you never know, maybe they will do. What we found interesting is that in order, because they were actually developing that farm, to plant the trees, they always found rocks in the earth, you know, and these rocks were there and they didn't know what to do with them. So we said, if this building would be a gigantic receptacle for these rocks, so then you get this. So you see it here, and you see here the box below, right? And you see a little bit of rock, and here you see a view on this plate on top. It's in a way a collector of rocks, so robust that even the rocks want to be there in some way. And so that's the plan. I mean, you could have imagined it, I guess, a little bit. And then we have the next plan, which is, I mean, we move. We move.
But this surreal landscape of walking on the moon was really, I mean, we still want to build it today. It's this kind of little Le Petit Prince that is suddenly on a planet somewhere. That project, and it's actually in a UNESCO state also in Tuscany, the olive mill Kersten was talking about. But okay, further, this is back to Belgium. This is a plan for a house. It's not a circle. It's actually an octagon, and where we somehow, in a circular way, try to arrange a house. It's not that easy, and you can see that it became this kind of centrifugal set of rooms, bedrooms mostly, but then also sometimes there's a pool in it, there's a living room, and the house is actually just a kind of, you could say, panopticon, in the sense that it just looks at the garden all around and looks outside from the inside. It's a beautiful garden, and then on top it tries to somehow disguise still some complexity that is hidden in the roof of in this kind of, almost like a flower hat.
Yeah, but it was also for a kid who is in a way disabled and who has only the house as his world. Huh? Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry, I help you for the voice.
No, I know. No, it's true, it's important, and somehow how we can make a universe for somebody who has this disability and that somehow still can live a normal life, and the pool was also part of that story. But to keep it brief, let's say I will go to the next project, because you can see here the panopticon it makes, and of course all these details, this is the living room in the higher part, are very important, but I guess it's also display of how you make material, how you look outside, how is the living room materialized here in wood, becoming even another project, and it's actually in the neighborhood of the house, is this art room, another project that we were asked to build. It was a garage on this spot of the site. There's an enormous house standing here, and then the terrain, what you can feel here, drops dramatically. It's in Brussels, both are in Brussels, but this person wanted, he has a collection of art, I wanted a room for art. Well, he wanted a space for art where this garage was standing. So this is actually the new project, of course. But what you cannot see is that it actually, when you enter it, it's this double height space, and it somehow connects to the other side, which is the lower part of the garden, where the same window, as you saw on top, suddenly translates itself back and becomes a terrace and another space to this enormous terrain of the garden, and somehow the Wunderkamer, where you can hang paintings even on the 5-meter height, became that one room with one roof on top of it, just slanted in an angle. And we cannot show sanctions, so that's not visible. It's just a room in this plan. But that's, by the way, very similar in this project that Kersten will show you.
From a room for art to a room for beer. I mean, well, so I think we both don't like beer. So maybe if anybody, do they make Negronis here or anything? I mean, maybe it's it's a good moment. I mean, to get through this whole thing. I mean, anyways, it's funny. I think it's most interesting here for us is to show it in how this building with its kind of box and the roof, in a sense, became that building, which is not different. It's a box with a roof, right? And I mean, we can talk about it, that it's beer and it's a very simple box, and we like to make these simple buildings which cost nothing. And I mean, we here experimented with this big visible roof, which completely changes, has an enormous urban impact, which we love. I mean, that all of a sudden, you kind of, the whole area has been transformed. It's about industry in the city, which is an important topic. But perhaps here in this kind of strange conversation we're having, it's a box with a roof. And you know, it's a scale thing, where a house can be a city, an art room can be a brewery in some way. And all of a sudden the scale dramatically shifts. And perhaps in the same logic, and it's almost like I will give the baton from myself to David, because I know here comes a plan. So here I have a similar idea. So you saw the Bahrain, the Dars, and they were there. So the columns and the plates. And the columns and plates were like laying dormant for quite some years. I mean, I don't know, there were not many columns and plates in our office. And then all of a sudden they came back. And here they came back, columns and plates. And it's a project which already we started quite some time ago now, for 5 years, maybe longer, 7, I don't know. Either way, we now started building it. And it's columns and plates. It's 2 buildings, actually. It's a long story which we skip here. It's next to the station in the city of Ghent, where we both come from, where Jan, our real director, still lives. Here, the most important thing was, how can you make urbanity in a city which radically embraces bike life and things like that? So here you cannot really see that here, but I think you do see it in the plan. It's a kind of towers which are 2 gigantic bike elevators and bike storage on every floor. That's exciting, and we're building that now. But at the same time, it's also this plate and column, very much like the Dar in Bahrain, with inside these boxes. So it's funny to see that back. And here it has this very big scale. The columns, as they're now built, they're actually even thicker than on this image, are 75 centimeter. So they're enormous. They even have incorporated the gutter, which is a big fight, Jan. And you see that here. Here you see this enormous core with the bike storage. And in some way, I mean, like the boxes and the roofs, it's not so different in their relationship as the columns and the plates David is talking about.
Yeah, and maybe also the idea of what is architecture, what is finishing, and I think the project just shown by Kersten, it's indeed in the construction, and it's brutality, or it's like the structure. Sometimes you see buildings and they're being built and they're amazing, and suddenly they get finished and they don't look like anything anymore. And so
thank you, Valentin.
Yeah, and so can you make a building that finally stops when the rough construction is actually built and it becomes the facade of the project? So it's something that comes back also later when we will talk about our project here. But this is another housing project, very, very scarce housing in a sense, like it's very basic, no corridors, no, well, there's an elevator, there's a stair, you can go up. But then corridors outside, connecting very simple units, overlooking a new neighborhood that's being built. And you can see here these passerelles. It makes a kind of neighborhood in the city block itself. And at the same time, views over the harbor. This is in Antwerp. The harbor city of Belgium. And it has this enormous ambition to make a new neighborhood. And that's something very special in this very industrial area where this is actually what you see here. The curvy things are old slaughterhouses, and there were bigger other industries around. It's in the harbor. But you see how these areas get transformed and become areas for housing and new neighborhoods. And so this housing project that we built actually at the same time when we built this project, which came a bit earlier, but weirdly enough later in the numbering. I don't know, so it should be later. But this project here on the right, that's the housing in the right side, is actually a very big complex in one of these slaughterhouses. It's a school, it's actually a campus. It's more than 20,000 square meters, higher education school, university of physics and science and food and techniques. And a new tower next to it is kind of its administration. Because finally, it's just this enormous fields of labs. Students can work there, and this is already the pictures after the renovation. So we reused basically these existing concrete structures with the top north lights to make a new floor in it, and then these enormous platforms for science. Very much a switch, but this is Sweden.
Round columns. It shares the round columns.
Well, the idea of the horizon, I think we didn't talk yet about it, but we come from LA, our first office in 2003 or something, and then suddenly this discovery of the horizon, the palm trees also, but the horizon. And here a client asks us to make a house with an enormous view, a horizon on a lake in Sweden. And somehow we were intrigued by that question. And can it be that you live among the trees and suddenly the trees become actually the house? Round columns, the same section, by the way, as trees. Somehow they are the structure of the house. They make up two plates on this sloping terrain, and you have a life that just unfolds in it. And then some weird roof on top, beautiful windows. And then a plan, and you will see the plan because that's where we switch, that somehow allows, and this is the roof, of course, with an amazing view, the lake. The same reflection on the lake is in the roof, which is in aluminium. And then the plan again, 25 columns, rooms, and they are made out of glass, so they're like glass pavilion in a glass house, standing in the field of columns.
Yeah, well, I mean, the good news is I think it's my last time, or more or less, and then it's David's last time, and then we're kind of there, really. I mean, wow. So sorry. I mean, well, anyways. So I mean, very fast in a sense. You can talk about many topics, but we loved when we made this accidental sequence how this house with its rooms, which are in a way windows because it's the only openable parts, and as David said, almost like spaces, almost courts, in a way is this, and the scale is radically different. What is it, 14 by 14 meter or something?
Yeah, 14,
yeah. And this is 100 by 100 meter, you know? It's like, bang, you're back in this kind of strange scale game. That house we built, it's there, you saw it. This other radio and television complex in Brussels, we are building, so it's also somehow weirdly real. And yeah, it's the same thinking. It's a box which tries to understand how, maybe in the light of this RTS building in Switzerland, how you build a city in a building, but it's also much simpler. It's almost like a pizza box, almost like the house you just before, a little bit, I don't know, like almost like a castle in a way. There's an octagon under it, you will not really see it. We see a few glimpses on the pictures. And then this 3-floor, big, kind of very open, very ephemeral space, which is in a way the place for work. But you see it here, just put on top. You see it here in the construction, you see it here, you see it here standing on top of this octagon. And you see here this kind of hyper transparency of that box. And now there's more recent pictures, but Bas didn't take them, so they were not allowed in this presentation, where you see the gardens by Bas Smets, and you see the steps, and you see these aluminium facades, of course, corrugated, perforated. You can imagine what we have chosen, and somehow they become a house on themselves. You know, this kind of top is enormous house placed on top of this octagon building. So this, I think, is, of course, it's a discussion about a scale, but perhaps also one of technology. I don't know, we are still investigating, because it's all investigation. Huh? So I guess here we decided, like with some projects we do, to have some sort of formalism disguising any kind of hint of technology. I mean, there's at most these kind of sunscreen, sorry, there's solar kind of panels on top, almost like Bart Simpson hair, which will be like, you see it on top there. It will be complete, which is kind of interesting, we thought. But in other projects, like you saw in Solo House, which David showed, you see these boxes on top, or in the complex of the office building I showed with the kind of Flintstone columns, you know, the office building with the kind of robust kind of facade. I mean, we try to translate the problem of technology, air handling, for example, into a specific kind of expression, but always distant. It's kind of form-content conversation. So here is a very recent building, kind of just finished really in Brussels, actually 150, 200 meters from our office, maybe 500 meters, which is in a way a radical transformation of a building again. It's an office building in the European Quarter, which in a way, the most important is that. I mean, we love how it looks like, but if you don't understand this, you don't understand the game, of course. Essentially, we kept the whole building. It had a problem of floor-to-ceiling height. It had this kind of fake ceilings, you can imagine it. So we cut out all the machines, all the ducts from the, in a way, actual building. So we had to liberate space, not to have to demolish the building. And we kind of put them all on the outside, you see them here. And that kind of made this kind of very strange, thick facade. You see it here and you see it there, which is the building. So, of course, other things happen. But this is where, in a way, a radical embrace of, on the one hand, rebuilding, but on the other hand, technology, and yet a complete ignorance of the representation of it makes the architecture. So you see it here. So in some way, and then again, entirely something else, and we're getting to a close from my side, and then back to Tirana very shortly. This house is not technological. It's as close as you can get almost to the art room. It's very recently finished. These are even not pictures by Bas, one should say. We actually stole them from another photographer. And so Bas still needs to do this. It's an artist studio where you could argue that problem of representation I just showed in this thick mullions, which are like an almost inflated building, are here a problem of, I mean, flooding. So this is a building built in a floodable area, where I guess nobody would ever still be able to build, but this artist who is very famous in Belgium now convinced the people he could do his atelier there. And so we decided to make this very sturdy, very big box, but where the floor is much higher than you would imagine, and the holes you see here are actually flooding holes. So in a way, the building communicates mildly its strange negotiation with its own fate. So the floor starts where the window is. That's his atelier. Another window shows where he sometimes stays. And all the holes are where potentially, if the whole thing would be flooding like Ark of Noah, you know, the water would just go through. I mean, I'm again back to my robustness. You can see this building has almost nothing. It has this enormous scale in a sense. I mean, if you stand next to it, your head is about the height of the window. But at the same time, it's very modest, very simple, very, you know, easy building. This is some pictures of this not bus photographer of the atelier down. And here you see it standing. It's really, these are pictures from last week, no, is it? I mean, so they're probably the most recent ones. This brings us to this plan. Even towards the end, a simple rectangle. Down the ground floor plan, the atelier is just a rectangle. The top is the rectangle with a few spaces on the side. No stairs in the building, only hanging outside. So it's trying to push for some sort of Spartan experience. And that brings us to David's, I think, last contribution before Tirana.
Yeah, and just mentioning in our previous project, Kersten showed, it's this series also in the sense that he showed the gallery with the different rooms, you could say, that one follows after the other. And then you saw the art room as almost like a room jumping away and becoming an art room on its own. Then the artist studio became one of these other projects that run away from the gallery. It's actually an artist from that same gallery. So, but then a totally other scale again. And this is a project for, actually this is a satellite factory. It's a new thing, right? They're conquering space these days. And satellites, or again, I mean, after James Bond did it in the 60s, this is the real world. It's in Belgium, in Charleroi. There's being built they claim the biggest of Europe satellite factory. And so this was a project that was asked to us, and there is an existing building, this little rectangle you see. We decided to not use it, but just for parking, because then we didn't have enormous amounts of cars, so we needed to put a ramp next to it. So no offices. Actually, we decided to put all the offices on top of this enormous building that is actually this big satellite company, or actually production hall factory. And this is actually some pictures, as you can see here, the existing building, the building as it's being built today. It's a bit further. There's a lot of patios, so this is one of these circles, as you saw in the plan. And again, we're not going into the complexity of an enormous factory for satellites, and you can imagine it's extremely complex with lots of machines for the most cleanest of the biggest clean rooms ever. But anyway, and it has a facade that tries to make the pill shape, as you saw in plan, almost like disappear, become, and you can see there's a horizon of lights. This is a window, which is a vitrine, but actually the offices are all on top behind this micro-perforated facade in aluminium. And this brings us to Albania and to a very beautiful project, we think. It's in a way the towers in Ghent you saw, but very sculptural. We call it the flower tower. What you see is the structure and the columns and the floor plates, but they are actually set in this amazing shape, much more sculptural than the rectangles you have been seeing, forming some kind of flower plan. And at the same time, the structure is immediately also its facade. And we like that robustness. It's been mentioned many times here.
Kersten, yes.
Yeah, Kersten has
his
favorite
I have an
word,
obsession.
but I say it once today.
Sorry,
robustness.
I apologize.
I think the robustness is something that interests us really a lot in this project, in how it can somehow mediate the site, but also with a very simple gesture of, let's say, the figure around the rectangular core become really a sculptural tower for the skyline of Tirana.
Yeah, well, and the second one, I mean, these are the projects which we believe have developed the furthest. So the flower tower and the Teuta complex in Dures. And we were very happy, I mean, I must say, both Orges, with who we are doing the Flower Tower, and Ira, which we were meeting this afternoon, again about Teuta complex. I mean, that they somehow want to go with us in this thinking, which we hope we shared a bit with you here tonight. We know we talked very long and we apologize, but we felt it was important to understand in a way the simplicity, and you could argue the formalism, but in a positive sense, of these buildings. Like how can, as David was saying, how can you design this perimeter? I mean, what is this figure? I mean, if we show the satellite complex and then this, it somehow seems to make a lot of sense. Like how do you make the presence of this building, even though it's very tall, this one? But also how here we can design with the thickness of the facade. How can you, in a way, partly make this building, protect this building, of course, but how can you also be very open-minded to different iterations of the plan? I mean, you know, we have shown projects to you where the plan seems to matter a lot, but even that plan is only a set of rooms. But the way you use the rooms, we try to keep as independent from these rooms as we can. I mean, radically independent. And in a way, when you go to this much bigger scale, we see this in a way as figures where the outer perimeter and the core, in both cases, is what we fix and which we really put a lot of attention to. But inside, a lot can happen. And that's also very realistic, we believe. And I think we have a lot of appreciation for, if you see Skanderberg Square and TID Tower, which was done by 51 here many years ago already, in how these figures survive urbanistically, but also how, in a way, and we of course know because we've always been following what Freek and Johan have been doing here, like how, for example, TID Tower is a project which was often waiting for a program, and that kind of, in a way, independence, we believe is one of the big, I would say, qualities of working here, and that's where a certain kind of formal rigor, and here we work together with Peter Vermeers, we were mentioning him earlier, so that we work on how we study in this thickness and painting the sides. It has a certain Corbusian vibe to it in a sense. And that then, what happens in these buildings, we have an idea, we developed it together with Ira and her team, but at the same time, this is extremely flexible. So from this perspective, we hope, and here you see two models as we have been photographing them, in the last days, just before coming here. We hope that this context of the lecture gives a much broader understanding of why we think here and exactly here you can do this kind of architecture.
Yeah, you can see there the collage of the border crossing, Mexico-US, looking at the project in Tirana, and the same robustness is present. I use the word again, no, but both projects have a similar attitude towards what is structure, what is tower, what is architecture. I think they're, for ourselves even, and you must ask these questions afterwards, but our new experience in how we make architecture and form and a plan that it has a certain new liberty. I mean, you saw a lot of squares and circles, but suddenly we have a more, let's say, flower-like plan, and then suddenly there's a pentagon. You've seen octagon, but the pentagon with the open corners, it's as well the structure, as well the performance of the building, and it's as well the expression, even in the best end result, painted together with the artist Peter Vermeer. So there's all this layering, and we started with a picture of the artwork in our office. This is back in our office. I think, and we love making models, as you can see. They will be on show in the next week or in 2 weeks, the festival. I think the layering we wanted to present today is really essential in how we think and make architecture. And let's
no, I just want to say that, of course, in this dialogue with these fantastic clients, I have to say, because I think we talked about Orges, we talked about Ira, you know, Tony, he's here. I mean, this is very special, and that's the experience we had in all the projects we did, whether it was Switzerland or Spain or Sweden or Belgium, and what we have here as well. I mean, and it's only like that when you understand the hierarchy of decisions, and that you can do it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Very brief.
So I go with him there, right?
I
go with you.
Ik heb gezegd wel.
He escaped.
Yeah, I think you guys deserve a break, like a.
Oh no! I think
just
the
to
only
catch your breath,
thing
if
the
anything,
only thing
yeah.
we want. So there's lots. They must make Negronis here, no? Is that not true? Yeah, we can ask, no? I mean,
Negroni,
you don't make?
Yeah.
Come on, I don't believe that. Huh? Afterwards? Okay, fine. Afterwards, I mean, we do our job, and afterwards it's okay. We can do it. No. So no, but please start before everybody falls asleep. And I mean, David will walk in.
We're gonna try to not keep you here for too long.
Oh, but we are fine. I'm
before the
just worried
Negronis,
about
I
the
mean.
audience. I mean,
Yeah.
we're used to it, you know. I mean, this was really the brief version.
That was the brief version.
Yeah.
No, thanks so much. I think that was very comprehensive, like almost an encyclopedic journey through the practice. At several points, I wanted to kind of just be like, don't spoil everything, because then people won't actually go and buy the office monographs for the practice.
Now we believe in printed matter. You have to buy books. Buy books, you know, support local bookstores, buy records, listen to music, believe in the real thing, you know. Come on.
For myself, I'm going to count it as you know, the architecture book that I had to read for May. So
Okay.
So thanks. I guess we got a really good view of, let's say, the architecture journey, but a little bit less was said about your personal journeys, how you found yourselves coming into architecture, and what kind of the formative experiences and passions were that kind of have shaped and informed your practice today. Obviously, you know, a presentation that was so comprehensive and so passionate. There's some kind of engine behind that. So we were just kind of curious to see.
Well, of course, I mean, this is also a very long conversation, but in a short sense, I think, and David and me, I think we properly met each other. We were studying in the same school, but not exactly in the same year. We properly met each other while doing some sort of study trip to Los Angeles. And I think we both somehow understood that the desert and that city, and then as David mentioned, I think the hedonism, the kind of the beach. I mean, you know, kind of Brainerd Benham, if you want, but just really one-to-one experience. That we shared a kind of fascination for that, and with that came a whole baggage of artists. I mean, Rocher, Hockney, we mentioned a few, Baldassare, I'm sure. And that wasn't decided back then that we would end up working together. I mean, David had been doing a lot of projects in the school with Dries, who we mentioned shortly, who was a fantastic person, but became more of an engineer and later even an investment banker. And I mean, I ended up moving to Rotterdam for a while. I mean, we mentioned Rotterdam shortly. And it was really that first question, that table, which was some sort of an alibi to first think table and then think the space for the table together. And perhaps, I don't know, I'm just hypothesizing here, but if A plus U would have not jumped on it, and we would have not asked Bas, and Bas would have not photographed it, and we would have not realized this, and the client of that notary would have not asked us to go back to LA, and making us end up, you know, living to a certain extent and working together there for a while, maybe it would have been different. You know, sometimes these things are strange, you know.
Yeah, and it still continues today, you know. Indeed, the LA stories, you could say, some kind of start, and there's two mics. Or okay, good, great.
We're gonna share it.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, And we just recently were in the States again, but then in Texas, teaching, but also immediately looking for an excuse to again go to the desert to look at land art. Robert Smithson, Michael Heiser, and together with the students, and at the same time together we went to see Marfa, Donald Judd. So it's all these things that are very important in not only the trip, you know, and then the landscape, and again the horizon, but then again also on scale, what does that mean? The desert, Kersten mentioned it, but then again an intervention, land art, or the barracks of Jud's Marfa. So all these things, architecture, art, landscape, horizon, and again some palm trees. I mean, they all come back somehow in each project. It's something that fascinated us from the start, and still does. If that's an answer to the question.
Yeah, we keep on mystifying. We keep mystifying.
I mean, it's very personal. These things are kind of obsessions, and they are really part of the DNA, let's say, of the office. But of course, there's all these projects, and they have programs, and they have all these questions, clients, engineers, teaching, and it's all a kind of a world on its own, in a sense, for ourselves.
Yeah, so I guess what I kind of take away from that is you kind of leave yourself open to exposing yourself to as many kind of circumstances and different kind of scenarios as possible in order for, I guess, in one sense, serendipity to work its magic.
I think so. I mean, and because it's also, we are talking also partly to students. I mean, I mean, look, I've been teaching forever. I mean, maybe too long, I don't know. But I mean, and often that question, of course, appears. It's like, you guys, how did you do it? And how did you start? It's certainly not true that we started renting a space and we're waiting for a client. I mean, that's not how it happened. You need this kind of serendipity, indeed. I fear. I don't know. I've hardly ever heard other stories.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you can be ready for it, but at the same time you can also be too ready for it or something. You don't have to want it too much.
It's the first project we showed today, and it's maybe good to mention it. It was, as we said, a kind of build manifesto. So these two things are opposites, you can say. One is a building, the other is a manifesto, mostly written. And I think what we think, or what this somehow explains, is that there is always this duality in the work, which is, you could say, theoretical, but it's also very pragmatical and really tangible. And that's these two extremes somehow trying to unite it in a practice.
Yeah. So in that sense, I think that, you know, I'm still kind of in that serendipitous mood. I guess I'll ask Ray to help me out, bring us more down to earth and see how things can actually be made more pragmatic and tangible, so.
Hi. Sorry, Martin, but I'll skip a question. Don't kill me. And to keep it, basically to stay what you're talking about, you talk about architecture as a cultural undertaking, and to keep it short, what does that mean today for you? And maybe a bit more, we can explore it about the Albanian context.
Yeah, it's a good question, because you see, I mean, architecture as a cultural undertaking is also a very tricky statement. I mean, let's say we are European architects. It was like, I remember when we started working, then people would ask you, are you Flemish architects? Are you Belgian architects? What are you, right? And we would say, oh, we are European. You know, that would be the classic answer to it. Of course, there has been a period also when you would be European that would be immediately associated with a very particular white kind of bias, perhaps masculine. We're two guys, it's true. Which I guess is also very problematic. So if you'd say, I have a cultural project, then of course the next question would be, what is your project? You know, I mean, and who do you think you represent? So that's also potentially tricky. I guess the way we have seen architecture as culture is, I think, is on several levels. I think on the one hand, architecture is many things. I mean, there's so many buildings built everywhere, all the time. You go to Japan and you want to see something of Tsujima, you will never find it because the city is so big and these buildings are like footnotes. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, you never find them on the street, maybe apart from a kind of shop for Dior or something. And so there's that aspect. So that architecture and the built environment is not exactly the same, we believe. So I mean, we have somehow, we believe we have the obligation, if I can say, to keep the culture of architecture, which is thousands of years old, alive. So meaning we work within the framework of all architecture made, all art made, all culture made, and you try to distill it. It's almost like, you know, you give the baton, it's like relay. You take it for yourself and you give it, and you keep it alive to the next generation up to a point. But of course, what it then really is, I think, is subject of lots of misunderstandings. I mean, and these misunderstandings have been, I would say, historically part of architecture. We wrote about that. That is that, you know, even say, Alberti in some way misunderstood entirely what was Roman architecture when he tried to make it Roman. But that kind of misunderstanding is healthy, is creative. And we should not be too, I would say, anal or too kind of, you know, dogmatic about it. And I think we, as David was saying, in a desire to operate boldly in a pragmatic and on a theoretical level, I think we embrace that. You make things, we're also two people. So we have to somehow like what we do. You know, we have to like the thing, and not because of all the footnotes and the explanations. At the same time, as hopefully you also see, I mean, of course, there's a certain constant, and sometimes we discover tropes which we didn't work with for a while, but it also is a fairly open process. I mean, you know, all of a sudden you're fascinated by that. I don't know, you went somewhere. I mean, it's not cultural appropriation, but there is, you learn from place. And place is many things. I mean, Albania, I mean, go here, it's culture. It's also climate. Huh? It's also many layers of complex culture and appropriation. No, it's what the modern project was and how people deal with that modernity. You know, I mean, that has then to do with politics up to a point. Like, you know, you have a political heritage. I mean, can I embrace it? Can I not? Can I revive it? Can I not? What does it represent? And I mean, we are visitors here. We came late to Albania. I was telling that to you earlier. I mean, we have friends, we have colleagues who are working in Albania for 20 years. They know better, for sure. We were involved a little bit by accident, serendipity. So roughly 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago maximum. And so we are learning, we're looking around, we try to understand which buildings do we like, what seems to be a good answer. That building is built 10, 15 years ago, it stands, that square is amazing, maybe more amazing than we ever imagined, you know? I mean, that old building, we didn't know. I think that's how we do it, and that's the only thing we can. I remember, I think we have to be honest about this, the first projects we made here, I mean, even versions of this, I mean, the Flower Tower, at a certain point was, and I use it again, was much less robust in the beginning. It was a light building in a way. And we were thinking, oh wow. I would think it was Eddie Rama saying to us, we didn't meet him that often, but he was like, hey guys, seems like you still need to learn a lot of what is Albania. And he was right. I mean, because you gradually try to understand. It's about the way things are built. It's about what the building represents. You know, but so there's no final definitive answer. We believe by being here, by talking, by understanding, by discovering, we bring our stuff. It's part of our own cultural world. But at the same time, it enriches. I think that's the only thing we can do.
I love that you spoke about like the multiplicity of this and how it's architecture, culture, public space, life. The spectators, the audience of architecture, the people that live it. It's ugly, it's beautiful, it's political, it's not. It will stay beautiful. It will maybe become ugly, beautiful.
I mean, if I may, we learned a lot, and I say it very short, we learned a lot by working in Bahrain. Because it's a very complex context. I mean, Noor Al-Sayam was an amazing, in a way, client intermediate. At the same time, they had not built any of these buildings yet. And they had not made recent squares. There was, of course, a layer of contemporary stuff in the early 2010s, you know, as you have it everywhere in the Middle East. And they had this radical decision to rethink the kind of urban grain of Muharraq and say, how can we deal with that? How can you turn this into a cultural project, the Pearl Path, but how can we contribute for these people? How can you make urban space? Huh? But what was urban space? I mean, for them, I mean, the first step we thought it's shade, partly it's shade, so the trees came. Then it was some sort of solidity, so these lamps and these benches came. And so gradually, and in parallel with these dars, we tried to learn for ourselves a language. And it's not, I mean, we didn't desperately try to make it Bahraini. That made no sense, because what was it anyhow? But that made our architecture shift. And I think that's where you try, right? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Martin, can I still? I'm breaking all of your structure, I'm sorry. But that's why you have me here, maybe. Yeah, I mean, we already had touched a little bit of this, but you always, and that's maybe what I like more about you, the simplicity and the functionality. You spoke about it all the time, the perimeter of buildings. What do you still feel about that today?
Well, I think somehow there's this thing about functionality and basically the program or the brief or however we call it in architecture, which fascinates us that, and it was a long answer Kersten gave, but maybe also there was one word which I could add, which is the history, and it was mentioned, Alberti, all these things, but this architecture that somehow, yeah, let's say survives all these different times, and frame and infill is a very important element in our thinking in architecture. So you have a perimeter, what can be in there, can be trees, can be a room, can be people, can be life unfolding, has been said in the introduction. And I think any project, even these bigger now projects we're doing in Albania, want to somehow embrace still that idea that there is some kind of solidity, robustness, but also that still that basic, very simple, you could say, notion of what is program and what is architecture. Isn't it just about making frame and giving a sort of freedom to its content? And I think, well, there's gone from a satellite factory to an art room to a house and to a city. And all these things, in a way, you could somehow, in our practice, and not to simplify things, but somehow describe in similar ways. And I think that scale jump is a very important way of thinking. We even sometimes make furniture or even small installations, and then it goes back to becoming a city or a pearl path of 3.5 kilometers, which is based also on actually a very small element of a lamppost. So I think these tensions are very important still in the work today, as it was from the start of our work, actually.
Yeah, I think ultimately for us, despite all the desires and theories, it's about tactility. I mean, in a world which is increasingly dealing with the virtual, I mean, we are dealing with it all the time, whether it's the AI conversation which is going on, or the very fact that we essentially only look at our phones instead of to other people. I think we, in some weird way, without wanting to sound like traditionalists, but we believe architecture is uniquely positioned in all scales to bring back the tactile, the real. I mean, versus the virtual, we make the real. And we have to be careful that the real is not processed by the virtual, so that in a sense, even the image of what we're going to build is just virtually kind of made, but is kind of the result of a set of very precise decisions. I mean, people sometimes ask, yeah, you guys, you're so reduced or somehow minimal in one way or another. I don't think we are minimalist or in any way, but we'd like to, in a way, exert some sort of control, not because we want to dominate, but we believe that also in the collages, some of them we shared, you compose, you control, it's in, it's out. That's the perimeter in a sense. I want, I don't want. And I guess in our current world where everything is like generated, you open your phone and they have decided a million of things you seemingly want and you have not even made up your mind about it, drawing these lines is fundamental. And architecture, interestingly, might be very uniquely positioned to do that.
And it's even in these two very big projects. You saw one in Lausanne and one in Brussels, the two media headquarters. It's really this confrontation where this virtual world becomes actually architecture, or the production of this world becomes actually a headquarter, and what can it be? And it's been a lot in our discussions on how to make such a building survive and not just being the trope of a certain era, but become like architectures. It's about much more than just accommodating some kind of frenziness of today of AI or whatever. It's rather making spaces and accommodating creativity, life again, and even nature, if you want. That's really, all these things are present in both projects.
Back to you, Martin. Thank you.
Super comprehensive, and your energy levels are high, even though you haven't received your Negronis yet.
It's okay.
Maybe we don't take advantage of you too much longer. We ask a couple of questions from the audience.
Yeah, sure.
And
with pleasure.
So,
how do we bring the mic? It has a cable. That's still old school. That's very nice. Old
Hi.
school.
I noticed the influence of early OMA at some of the projects that you presented, and it's quite interesting to me the fact that you can draw a family tree, let's say, of renowned architects and star architects with early OMA as a parent. And I would like to know, being exposed to this
Office of
network,
Metropolitan Architect.
and also being part of this network, how much did it help office to become office?
At first I misunderstood, of course. You're talking about early OMA, yeah, of course. Well, look, I mean, from a kind of silly perspective, I think we do indeed like early OMA. I mean, it's very good work, because it's the most cultural work OMA did, very much within the framework of the city, you know, and culture and so forth. Now, I guess I think, you know, our sphere of influences is a mixed bag. I think what we always say, I mean, David and myself, is that very fundamental to us was that we both studied in Madrid, in Spain, and we studied with Abalos and Herreros, and it was their, maybe more than their architecture, it was their approach towards architecture, their kind of critical reading of architecture, their endless amount of references from Hockney and Banham to high-tech, I mean, they were very early discoverers of Ito, of Lacaton Vassal, all this. But indeed, you add to that, I think there was an important wave of these early projects of OMA in the 80s and maybe early 90s, which were then, I would say, placed by Geert Pekaert, which was a Belgian critic, a very important one, who managed, I think, to be one of the early critics who understood the similarities, say, between that work and Venturi or Rossi, and not see it as an aberration or an opposition to that. And I think if you manage to put these things next to one another, and of course Ungers is an important figure there, then we're in good company.
Yeah, and OMA should, I think, not be only the, let's say, theoretical part, which is extremely strong, but I think growing up also, even at school, but also in the context of our well, families, it was actually also part of how OMA is actually also an office that builds and is busy with extreme tactical things. It's not just theories, but there is really some investigation, and you had it a lot at the time in the 90s in Rotterdam, about how you really radically transform the thinking of what is material, how do you make things, can we twist it, and you were in Rotterdam, I was in Ghent, but it was all these kind of things together, and I think both things, so the theory, of course, but also the very tactile level that OMA was extremely tackling, was both influential to our work, and we were even, at some points helping out in projects, working at KGDVS. My father worked with OMA together, with Remco. So there was all these links, and somehow it was an amazing school for us.
Yeah, we're going to ask for a bibliography later, because there was a meteor storm of references that were kind of mentioned. I think what they would be quite interested in, yeah.
Okay, but that doesn't take away, we can answer another question.
Any other questions?
Oh, there's one in the back.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask a question related to a specific object, the one that is proposed in Durrës, the one called Teuta. And I'm sure it's not related to the queen, the name, but to the place, I guess, to the place where the building will be positioned.
No, it's also the queen, huh? Yeah, the queen is there. The queen is there. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. She was the one who was challenging the Romans. It's important. Yeah.
Okay. And as far as I remember, in that area before the 90s, there was a kiosk on the beach, and it was an audio center where the government called for people that were lost or issues that were lost. It was a kiosk in a pentagon. Was that one the one that gave you stimulus for the artistic approach, or is it just me being nostalgic?
Well, I wish we could say yes. I mean, it's a very beautiful story. I mean, we did not know.
Just in front of the building.
No, but please send us some pictures of this kiosk, because we did not know it. No, but it's funny that you mentioned this, if I may, because no. So the short answer is no, it wasn't. But it would have been amazing if it was. But what we experienced over the years, and I remember very fondly that when we were doing the Belgian Pavilion in 2008 in the biennial in Venice, for example, that so often people were much smarter than us. You know, they saw a million of references in buildings we did or projects we proposed, and they said, yeah, because the Belgian Pavilion, when you do that wall and you do it in metal, it's because of that. And then it's the same height as that wall of that building, and you probably did it for that reason. I mean, we're always like, shit, we did not know this. But I mean, but in a sense, I think that's the power of, again, architecture and form. Because I mean, you know, when you say I'm a formalist, and people say, oh wow, formalist sounds like postmodernism or something. But that's not what it is. It's the belief in that the figure, the form, is so autonomous that it manages not only to organize a million of things you do not know, but it also manages to acquire meaning. I mean, because it's abstract enough, so it acquires meaning, and that's very important. When we show the crematorium, it's many things, but gradually it acquires that meaning. So it's about this culture thing. So how can you open something? There's some suggestions, but many things you do not know yourself. And then gradually it becomes the full story. It has been like that for various projects of ours, that ultimately we start to tell the story. For example, I remember the RTS building. It's an ear shape in a sense, but that's totally by accident. I mean, it doesn't matter why. I mean, it's the site and so forth. But now everybody's convinced that we are doing a radio and television building in the shape of an ear, right? It makes sense. And that's interesting. But, and it's not really an ear. Some people see other things in it. But, I mean, that's where it somehow survives. That's, I guess, the closest artist to that, and we love him, and he loved his work. He unfortunately died a few years ago, is John Baldessari, right? Baldessari's work is exactly about that. You see this, you see a figure, you see a scene, you see a red dot, and you have to laugh.
And a lot of ears.
A lot of ears also.
And noses. But no, it's true. It's something funny how you can read into many things a lot, and I think that's the power of architecture. We try to, when we make a plan, a collage, a model, even a text or something, to keep it somehow free from closing what it actually is. So in a way, we are also fighting with the idea of this extreme high. Let's say, reality renders, because they somehow kill all imagination. And I think architecture has still the power to make people imagine things, and we're talking about that. So if you see a model, it's of course not a building. If you see a building, it's not the picture. If you see the picture, it's not the plan. And but if you put all these things together, suddenly it becomes a whole world on its own. I think that's also what we wanted to show today, and it's kind of complementary to life, and again, the history of the place and your example, and I think that's the beauty. People can read everything they want and imagine everything they want in a project, and it should allow that, to be so open to it.
More questions?
More questions? Maybe
No
one
more questions.
We have to round up.
We're only time.